Whoa.
What the?
I'm Spider-Man.
How dare you point at me?
You were pointing first.
Rude to point.
You're pointing at me right now
I'm
as you
pointing,
say that.
you're
Look
pointing.
at you.
I'm
Look
just
at your
pointing at
finger.
your pointing,
Look at your
which
finger
is
right
different
now.
than
What is it
normal
doing?
pointing.
You are pointing.
You haven't seen
You're
pointing
accusing
until I
me
get
of
through with
pointing
you, and then
while
you'll...
you're...
Man, Spider-Verse 2 is looking pretty damn good right now, you guys. But anyways, welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very interesting Marvel's Avengers related video, once again regarding our friendly neighborhood wall crawler, none other than Spider-Man. And besides IGN's latest hands-on preview with showcasing gameplay of Spider-Man in action within Marvel's Avengers, ranging from his web swinging, combat, and further informing us as to how exactly Spider-Man's narrative is going to be handled within the Marvel's Avengers structure, considering that this is a hero event instead of a hero operation or an expansion, it turns out that actually wasn't the only tidbits of info that we did receive today, but rather we did receive even more insights from the wonderful people over at Game Informer, who did further break down everything we can expect within Spider-Man's gameplay, as well as some very interesting characters who do directly pertain to Spider-Man's story. So if you want to read the entirety of Game Informer's article, I will leave a link to it in the description below, but basically I am going to be highlighting the major points that IGN did not discuss within their own exclusive hands-on preview video. There's also a plethora of some very cool looking screenshots of Spider-Man teaming up with the Avengers in-game, which obviously do appear very cinematic, but likely will not reflect as to exactly how Spider-Man will play physically within the game itself. And once again, even though we already received quite a lot of gameplay of Spider-Man in action today for Marvel's Avengers, we are expecting a War Table event for him the day before his main release on November 29th, which will likely showcase even more footage about everything that Game Informer breaks down in their article. But mainly for the case of Spider-Man's With Great Power Hero event, we did receive official confirmation that there will in fact be 2 brand new characters to be included within the Marvel's Avengers world that specifically relate to Peter Parker as a character. And as Game Informer goes on to analyze, is that Peter stumbles upon a sinister plot connected to AIM that may be bigger than he can handle. After interacting with Black Widow via her Tiny Dancer online alias, the two exchange information on AIM. He eventually meets the entire team and agrees to tackle this threat alongside them, but struggles to work under a team dynamic. By the end, Spider-Man will ultimately decide whether or not to remain a full-fledged Avenger. Other characters involved in the story include Liz Allen, Peter's friend and college classmate, who players will find in the Anthill. Mark Raxton also appears, who comic fans know best as the villain Molten Man, but Crystal Dynamics didn't confirm if we'll see his transformation here. So while it is rather disappointing that IGN already confirmed that we won't receive too many story missions with Spider-Man in his own hero event, it is cool that Crystal is bringing in Spidey-related characters into the Marvel's Avengers universe. Although, as the article highlights, is that we don't know for sure if we'll be able to fight Molten Man within the game, but seeing characters like Mark and Liz appear within this universe is pretty cool nonetheless. Now, moving on from the elements of Spider-Man's story, we now have one of the most important reasons why Spider-Man is included within this game is obviously to try and traverse around the open areas with his main movement system of web swinging. And while the footage that we did see from IGN did look incredibly stiff and clunky in comparison to some of the more recent Spider-Man interpretations in video games, like of course Insomniac's titles, Game Informer did go into further detail as to how exactly the web swinging, wall crawling, and wall running will all fully operate in tandem within Marvel's Avengers. And as Game Informer states, is that holding down the right shoulder trigger while jumping initiates web swinging, meaning Spider-Man's traversal feels fundamentally different from those of other heroes whose moves are mapped to the jump button. This design gives players more control over activating/deactivating web swinging, and should feel familiar to fans of dedicated Spider-Man games such as Insomniac's series. And alongside of this, wall crawling is present, and players can freely cling to and move around most surfaces. Spider-Man can also wall run like Captain America and Black Panther. The difference is that Spidey can wall run indefinitely. He does have sticky feet after all. He can run left, right, and up walls, and even bank around corners to leap into web swinging. And I have to admit, for a game that does handle several other heroes and their own unique playsets, it is rather cool that Crystal have done their absolute best to try and implement Spider-Man in a way that does feel natural to the Marvel's Avengers gaming formula. Because obviously there was no way in hell that Spider-Man's traversal within Marvel's Avengers was even going to come close as to how smooth and fluid it feels within Insomniac's titles of Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales. But seeing that Crystal was able to add in features like sky swinging, wall crawling, wall running, and even banking across different buildings is pretty darn admirable to say the least. Hopefully he at least feels smoother by the time we actually play as him in the game itself, which obviously does segue right into the main feature which the majority of us are going to be utilizing Spider-Man for within Marvel's Avengers, is of course the combat. And in a very encapsulating breakdown is that Game Informer describes, of course, Spider-Man's web shooters are an important offensive tool. Shooting targets builds up quote-unquote web status, a meter that, when full, immobilizes enemies. You can also knock webbed up foes into walls, making them stick there. Webs can also inflict various debuffs unlocked from a skill tree, such as making web targets more vulnerable to damage and status effects from other heroes or causing them to drop more health packs upon defeat. Crystal Dynamics says Spider-Man feels like a support hero in that sense. But furthermore, web shooters have alternate firing modes, such as a charge shot, web bombs, a web tether to stick enemies together, and a trap set on floors or walls that ensnare bad guys. Spidey even has a wide-reaching web attack that pushes mobs backward while immobilizing them. Additionally, Spider-Man can deploy a drone that fires web projectiles to help tie up enemies. The drone can also create bubble shields around Spidey, which helps defend objectives. Now, as for Spider-Man's ultimate heroic ability, his main move is a web wrecking ball. As the name implies, Spidey weaves a gigantic web ball that he slams down onto targets to deal significant damage. Some of the abilities are available right off the bat, while others are unlocked and improved through skill tree upgrades. Overall, Spider-Man is very adept at crowd control, but Crystal Dynamics says he isn't a ranged character despite his array of web attacks. Spider-Man still relies on an acrobatic flurry of punches and kicks to handle most threats. And finally, we do have one particular mechanic which I personally was not expecting Crystal to actually implement within Spider-Man's playstyle. But crazy enough, they actually managed to do it. Because as Game Informer goes over, is that Peter's trusty Spider Sense serves as a defensive ability. While other heroes block or parry attacks, Spider-Man dodges with players hitting the button when an indicator appears on screen. Nailing perfect dodges grants a defensive boost, making you sturdier for a limited period while also inflicting an impact armor debuff to the attacker. Like his other moves, the Spider Sense has a line of upgrades to make evasion even more powerful. So all in all, everybody, I'm actually thoroughly surprised that Game Informer was able to break down Spider-Man's inclusion in Marvel's Avengers even better than what we saw from IGN. I personally think it's pretty damn cool that we're actually able to fully upgrade Peter's Spider Sense as one of the main skill trees within the game. Not to mention that utilizing different types of web abilities, as well as making sure they are assault, support, and ultimate super moves all are intertwined with Spider-Man's playstyle in a fluid manner, is gonna be quite interesting to fully master by the time we physically play as Spider-Man on November 30th. It was pretty clear right from the get-go that Spider-Man's inclusion within Marvel's Avengers was never going to be at the same standards as what we have previously experienced with Insomniac's titles, especially due to the fact that this is simply Spider-Man being added into Marvel's Avengers instead of a completely standalone Spider-Man game. But on the flip side, with the restrictions that Crystal does have with the format that Avengers currently has, it does sound like, at least on paper, that Spider-Man is going to be as fully fleshed out as he can possibly be within this game structure. But regardless, only time will tell to see exactly how we as the fans and players of Spider-Man within Marvel's Avengers will receive his inclusion relatively soon. And with all that said, everyone, that's the video I have for you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comment section down below. What did you think of Game Informer's article fully breaking down even more information for Spider-Man's inclusion within Marvel's Avengers, and which part of Spider-Man's gameplay from IGN's video do you want Crystal to try and polish the most? For me personally, all the characters fight relatively fine within the structure that Marvel's Avengers has, but seeing that Spider-Man's traversal is completely different from all the other characters, I do hope that Crystal can at the very least try and polish it a bit more by the time he's included by the end of the month. And with all that said, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and for more Marvel's Avengers and Spider-Man videos like this in the future. And without further ado, peace out.